I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamoni, and I'm an acceptance coach who helps people heal from grief, loss, and trauma to discover their self acceptance and step into their personal power. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode shares insightful and inspirational stories along with practical tools, actionable insights to help guide you along your healing journey. Today, I have a really awesome guest from the north end of England. Her name is Terri Lee Shields. She's a host, a mentor, and a writer with a creative design background. She provides a unique insight after moving beyond the pain of grief by embarking on a natural healing journey and recovering journey, overcoming addiction, mental health distress, suicide, and abuse trauma. Terri shares grounded wisdom and knowledge gained through her experiences connecting with the spirituality and nature to create life-affirming ways of being. She loves to share her insights, encouraging others to choose themselves and use challenging life experiences to grow and heal in a holistic, balanced way. Terri, thank you so much for being on my podcast today. I'm really excited to have you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for hosting. It's like meeting of two worlds, isn't it?
It,
Right.
it is. We're only one giant pond away, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I want to give you the space as we get started here today to share a little bit about your story and a little bit about your background.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, my story is like there's so many aspects to it. I don't know. I'm just one of those. I've never had a settled kind of life, if you like. So over the years, I've explored lots of different ways of being. I've had lots of different experiences. Some of them really difficult, some of them really interesting and exciting. And I've kind of ended up in a space where I just kind of have sometimes what's considered a different perspective from a lot of people about life and about nature and why we're here and what we're all doing and how we cope with it and just how I view the world in the direction that we seem to be moving. I'm a creative person, so and a curious type. So I've always kind of used those personality traits, if you like. Well, not always. More lately, I figured out how I could use those traits to heal after years of struggle, real struggle, and hiding behind I don't know, the silence of not talking about the difficult stuff and the murky stuff and the hard stuff and living in a culture that's kind of maybe doesn't, especially when it came to things like grief and stuff, and trauma and abuse and things like that. It's very much not, I don't want to say swept under the carpet, but like that we just don't kind of talk about it. We do these traditional things, maybe someone dies and you have a funeral, and that's grief, that's your grieving. um Same, something tragic happens and it's like, right, well, pull yourself up and get back on the, get back going. And I did that for such a long time until I just couldn't anymore, till it was all just like, what the F are we doing here? And I couldn't cope with life, and I couldn't, and then yeah, it all came to a head, and everything changed after that.
Yeah, it's that's something about society that I think is a real struggle, and it's why I created this podcast is because we all grief is a very pushed off topic in society. We all see it as some big monstrous nasty thing, and we all kind of give it this like shoo, get away from us kind of thing. But it never really leaves us. It's always something that's part of our journey. And so I always say that if you learn how to move forward with grief, you're doing it the right way. But if you push it under the carpet, it can have some nasty side effects in your life, not necessarily in the good way. And so I love that you brought that up because that's a big challenge in the grief space that people like you and I are trying to change the world's perspective on how we view grief, how we talk about it, how we experience it. I think those are very valuable things that can help us move forward.
I think what's interesting, because most of my initial experiences with grief were obviously pre-internet era, and like it is a bit different now. I sometimes don't know, it's different for future generations, but I think like maybe it's our generation that kind of grew up with all we had was what was happening in front of us. We didn't have any other avenues for support or any other views into any other world or any other culture or anything like that, unless you traveled and stuff. And I grew up in like a small town up in the northeast of England. And like I say, our ritual, especially around, like, we'll talk about bereavement since people tend to associate that, but there's lots of different aspects of grief, or times that I've experienced grief anyway. Probably the bereavement got the most acknowledgement, and that was, we have a funeral, so people get together for a funeral and then get drunk after, and then that is probably about it. Like, and I never remember any space to beyond the getting drunk after, where people would tell silly stories and that sort of thing, and then just have a catch up. And I always felt like, why are we not talking about these people that have died, or like what happened to us, or like what it felt like watching them die, or like even as a kid, like it was weird because, especially when you're a child, you're like, oh, don't show them you're upset, sort of thing, or you know what I mean? Like, there was
Yeah,
discussions, are the children allowed at funerals and that sort of thing. And yeah, it was always just such a weird. I've just had a random story pop in my head. I'll tell you that, right? So when I was in my early 20s, I got invited to work in Asia for a while. So I'd like lived in the northeast of England, and then I worked in London for a while, and then I got the opportunity to go and work in the Philippines for a while. So like a completely different environment, right? This experience has changed my life forever. But there was one, and I was a photographer at the time. So we were doing a photo shoot one day. We'd found that someone else in the group had found a location, and we were doing photo shoots. And it was actually this private garden, but it was huge, and it was like a jungle. Okay, so we were like really excited to go. And one of the guys said, we got there and everything, and he says, oh, I'll just pop in and just like tell them that we're here and see if there's anywhere we're allowed to go. Popped in the house, came back out, and was like white as a sheet. And we were like, are you okay? And he was an American guy, so the group was very much, it was like a bit of a mix. It was some Canadians, Americans, a couple of Brits, and a few Filipinos, but it was mostly, Westerners, we'll say. And he come out and he was a bit white as a sheet, and we were like, are you okay? And he was like, I'm fine, but you know what, there's a dead body in the middle of the room. And we were like, what? So we were all just like, what do you mean? Like, explain, please. And one of the Filipinos started like laughing, and he was explaining. He says, oh, it's probably a family member. And he was like, yeah, I think it's like the granny or something. And as we were all still a bit like shocked and surprised. And basically the guy explained that in the Philippines, when someone dies, the traditional thing to do is to have a period of mourning, and you bring the deceased person into the home. You clear out like all of the, you create a sacred space for this person. You lay them out on the table and in your front room. People can come to visit for a week and see this body, and bring gifts or food, flowers, whatever it is, and lay it out. And then after the week, they have the funeral and like a dedication, and send so that apparently, this is me all paraphrasing because obviously I'm not in it, but apparently it's to let the soul leave the body and give people a chance to mourn, to like see the death. And and this is like, anyone could go in the house, friends, neighbors, children, anyone who wants to go in and see that person does that. And that was like, culture shock, like mind-blowing different experience. And I had so many experiences over there that just made me question everything about the culture in the West, right? And that was one of them. And it was like, and I was fascinated. I was absolutely fascinated by that. And we also had a loss in the group at that time. Someone actually, who was Filipino, committed suicide. And because that was considered really shameful, he didn't get that. he literally had the next day was, I think, cremated. And that was
Wow.
considered, like, because of the way, because he took his life, that was considered a way of, again, saving his soul, like, or something, with the instant kind of fire thing. So I'm sorry for the lack of my detailed education on these cultures, but I thought, wow, these people have really thought about death. And it was the most exposure I'd ever really had to death and grief in that sort of like raw human primal almost way. Like, because over in the east, obviously there's lots of deep culture and traditions and things like that. There's still kind of a lot more depth of culture, I felt, than what we have over in the west. But it was just such a contrast. And when I got back, I lost probably like my closest family member to cancer. I watched her get very ill and die. And just the comparison, like I thought then, like, not that I would want, didn't choose to actually go and see her body after she died, because I wanted to remember her being alive, but really made me think about like some of the rituals we have around death and loss, and how hidden it is and how hard it is then to talk about the experiences or even say a proper goodbye to the person. And I really did consider it then when I had that close family bereavement. Did I want to go and see them once they had died and see her body and stuff? And I decided I didn't. I decided I didn't want that for me. But that is the first time that I honored my grief in my own way. So rather than just because I had to actually arrange her funeral and everything, do the house clearance and all that. It kind of like passed down to me in a very unspoken way. I didn't get asked permission if I consented to anything. It just kind of happened because my nan wasn't able, she couldn't do it, I guess. So it just kind of fell to me to do all that. So it was like, and I was quite young still then. It was like, very responsible to like arrange a funeral and make all these decisions and do all that. So I did all that. I kind of like did the duty of what everyone expected. And then, but ever since then, I've grieved in my own way. I've created my own little rituals around like grief and how I honor her passing, or and just use that always, that because I've had lots of losses in lots of different ways, and I use that as like a foundation, I guess, of my grief process. Do you know what I
I
mean?
think
Like, I might have got
yeah,
off on one a bit there, but what I'm trying to say is like we think there's a way that you're supposed to grieve, or you think there's like, because we've got all these traditions and stuff, and it's all very formal in the West, or my experiences have all been very formal, and everyone's, like you say, you do the funeral and everyone's dressed in black and it's all very smart, but that doesn't have to be the way we grieve if we don't want to. Like, it can be messy. Like, some of the things I've done, like for my grief processes, is like, you know burying things, or like planting things, or going out into nature and connecting through things like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be neat and in a box and following
well
a
that's
traditional path and
Well,
all
that's the thing that Western culture, I think, really struggles with, honestly. And I've witnessed it firsthand when I lost my grandfather 5 years ago. I had the unfortunate situation to watch him pass away in my arms. He had like a seizure-like moment, and he was gone. And I was like, "What the hell happened?" Like, I'd never seen that in my life before. And but what happened in that process is exactly like what you said. The cemetery people come by. They, put the body in a body bag. They take them out on a stretcher, and that's it. That's all you see. There's nothing to it. And so, for some people, if you do a burial, you'll have a graveside, funeral service, and then again, they're in a casket. They get put in the ground. That's it. It's done. You have your little funeral party, if you will, and life goes on. If you cremate somebody, you get a box of ashes back, and that's that. They leave a lot of this the process of death out in that grief process. And I think that shock that you described about that photographer friend of yours in the Philippines going, "Oh my God, there's a dead body in the room. Like, what, what is this?" That shock is a real representation of us not showing that side of that process for a lot of people that experience that. And the big thing you highlighted too is that um, death and loss across the world is celebrated very, very different. Over in Asian cultures, they have an entire different process for how they handle that. Africa has its own set of procedures and processes for honoring death. England's got its own processes. The United States has its own processes. Some cultures treat death like a celebration. Everybody has this. I was talking to a lady in Africa 2 months ago, and she said, "Yeah, in certain tribes in Africa, death isn't seen as this big tragic loss. We look at Americans and we're like, why are you so upset? Why do you cry so much? This is like." This is a person leaving this world. They graduated. They're going on to the next realm. They're going on. Yeah, and they're like they're free, so we celebrate them for congratulations on that. You passed the test. You're going. And then she said, but we see you Americans go, "Well, what's this like hiding things? You don't even see the body. You don't even celebrate really with that. It's always a mourning negative. I lost something versus celebration. Um, and so I think it's really interesting how different cultures process that differently, and they have different, cultural belief systems around what death actually means, what it stands for, what it's attributed to. So
Yeah.
I love that you shared that experience you had.
Yeah, thanks. Well, what I find super interesting, because I do a period when I kind of changed my life quite a bit, I kind of started aligning more with nature, and very much what I do now is I try to keep my life as rooted with nature as possible. And I've done all sorts of things like based around growing food and community projects and stuff. And one thing that was really interesting, it's maybe it's linked with my, I'm not obsessed with death. That's a bit weird. I'm fascinated by death. I am fascinated by death and death and rebirth and these cycles. And it's such a part of nature. It's such a huge part of like creating a garden or anything that you want to create. Like something has to die for something else to be born. Like everything we eat, as something has died, something has given up its life to give life to us. Like death and rebirth, this giving of like energy from one form to another, it's literally like part of everything we are. Like every cell in our body, everything about us that keeps us alive is attributed to like something else's death. And it's like I just find it now like such a beautiful, fascinating part of life, like process. And what excuse me, and what I find really interesting is, so in the gardens we have compost systems, or if you're running like maybe it's a bigger garden and something. And this was, I found really fascinating, because I'd never heard of compost before until I started doing community gardens and stuff. And the magic of a compost heap, right, is that you put your scraps, like your food scraps and that on, and you put all this waste in the pile, and you maybe turn it a few times. And then you know what? In a while, depending on the system you're using, could be like 3 months or a year's time, you've got this rich, nutrient dense sort of like special compost that you put on your plants that then feeds the next lot of plants that you've got. And without that compost, the soil that you're growing in depletes. It's like you need those extra nutrients and everything. And we're not taught that, we're not shown that as part of our food system. I also got a bit, and like I say, I'm a bit fascinated with all of it, like our waste systems. And I know it's probably similar in America as it is here. And in the, like I say, a lot of the Western cultures, we don't see our waste. So here, you've got your rubbish, you put it in a bag, you put it in the bin, and then the bin men come, they take it away, they take it over to like landfill or whatever, we don't even know. It goes to the magic where waste goes place, and we never see it again. We never actually have to deal with it. We use toilets that flush away our waste, our human waste. We don't even have to deal with our shit anymore, right? We don't even
Yep.
see shit anymore. People get offended where I live if they see some dog poop on the floor, you know what I mean? And it's like, all of that aspect, like I just got really fascinated about it, because that was something else again in the Philippines that was they have a lot of our waste, Western waste, was being shipped over the Philippines and hidden in the oceans there, and these like islands and stuff. Like again, we wouldn't even know that, right? You'd
Interesting.
be like, what?
I didn't know
Why would our waste
that.
be shipped all the way over there? It's like, oh well, because actually they're running out of space in like the UK and stuff for landfill, so they pay other third world or developing countries to take on our waste and stick it in their landfill. And they don't have a
That's
facility we
fascinating.
do, so it just piles up on a random island in the Philippines and makes all this mess over there. So it's like, it's really interesting to me, just that link between how our culture has developed to deal with death, is how we deal with all of that side of it, the decay, our aging, even like our waste. It's all like, don't let that happen. Like, don't look at it, don't watch it, it's disgusting, we don't want it, you know what I mean, that whole thing, when actually
Yeah.
I just don't see it that way. Like I just see it as like aging as a gift, and our life as a gift, and if we didn't die, then life wouldn't be precious.
Yeah,
You
well,
know?
I think that's something that, a lot of people, I think, fear death for that reason. I remember, I don't know if you know who Gary Vee is here in the States. He's a motivational speaker and an author. Um,
Yeah, I think I do know him.
um,
Yeah.
he was in his car one day. This happened during COVID, and somebody in New York was like, Gary, like, can I get a picture of you in your car? And he rolled his window down and said, "Yeah, take a picture. It's cool." And then she says, "Gary, I got my phone up here taking a video. What's one bit of advice you want to give people?" And he goes, "One day you're gonna die." The look on this girl's face, I mean, she looked like she's about to pass out. I mean, she was white as a ghost. She was like, "What did you just say? Like, what?" She was speechless. And he goes, "One day you're going to die." And he said, "What are you going to do with your life? What are you going to contribute? What are you going to build? What are you going to create?" And she said, "Gary, that's morbid." And he said, "The reality is you're going to die one day. It's part of life." And so he said, "I'm not going to hide it from you, because your biggest regret of life is going to be waiting, not doing things, hoping, wishing, and praying all the time. And then when you do get to that place of life, you're gonna have a lot of regret. And that death moment, by the way, is gonna suck. It's gonna be awful." Um, and so his behind the scenes, on the topic of what you were saying about rebirth and death, um, he took that philosophy to heart to say, let's not hide it anymore. Let's admit the fact one day we're gonna be there. All of us are. It's a part of life. And so
Yeah.
for us to hide it or sugarcoat it or not talk about it or push it under the rug, or when we deal with grief, when we're faced with it, like when I had the unpleasured thing of watching my grandfather die. I've had the unpleasurable thing of watching a stillborn be born into the world. I can say in those moments of death, you face reality. You face the acceptance that you're going to be there one day. And it's not to be this negative thing that society makes it out to be. It's not supposed to be this push under the rug and we'll just won't talk about it. And as you said a few seconds ago, like we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to think about it. Like let's just live life. We'll prolong it and avoid it as much as we can. But when we do that in life, what ultimately happens is that thing we fear. It comes right to the forefront, whether we like it or not, whether we're ready for it or not, and it's going to be there. So the real question is, how do we handle that? How do we process our grief? How do we understand what we just saw? How do we comprehend the situation we're in? And how do we make the best of that? Because it doesn't have to be this negative push under the carpet thing, like you said about the Indonesian in the Philippines, where this person's grandmother was in a house for a week after she died. To an American, that would scare the crap out of somebody. That would just be like, ah, like ooh, what are you doing? Like, but to them, it's like, I'm just paying my tributes. That's just how we do this. And that's something to be really celebrated, is that difference of opinion, that difference of culture and value and belief system. That we can celebrate death. We don't have to be scared of it.
Well, I think because it's like when you start trying to suppress something, I think it generates fear. So it's just like, how do we deal with grief? I've dealt with all my grief experiences now by trying to be as present with it as possible. Sometimes it's overwhelming, right? We get these moments of emotion and overwhelm, and it can be too much. We might have to not deal with it right there and then. But the more I've been able to build my capacity for emotion and being present and feel it, like you take away the fear. I think one of the worst things in life is living in fear. Like fear that you're dying is worse, because you end up not living. You end up not living your life. Like you say, you end up with regrets, not living your life because you're afraid of getting hurt, or you're afraid of losing something, or you're afraid of dying yourself, or whatever consequence it might be. And then you've just had this amazing chance to create whatever you want on this earth. And we didn't because we were afraid, or we were repressing who we are or how we feel and things. And I've just learned that the more capacity I've got to feel and be present with scary things, with my own limitations or sadness, all of that, the more capacity I've got for life and living. You know what I mean? It seems to go hand in hand for me. Like what you were saying, like Guy says, he's quite well off now, isn't he? I think he does all right for himself. um,
Yeah.
so you know what I mean? It's like I think the more you're trying to hide, right, from the reality of life, death, loss, all of that, the more we try to hold on to it and everything, and like, not, I don't want to lose this thing, or if I lost this thing, it will be devastating. Right? Okay, it might be devastating, right? Some of the things I've lost, some of the things you've lost have been devastating, but you're still here and I'm still here, and we go on. And the difference is, do I go on in devastation, or do I feel the depths of the devastation and then use that for something to be reborn out of it? Do I use that, which is what nature does, which is what these cycles do? Something, so we lose something and we break it down, we allow it to like go through a process, and then you can use that to grow something else. That's how, literally how our earth moves. Like that's how all the plants and everything we rely on in this planet, all the beings, all the animals, everything, something has to die, and then we use it to feed something else to live. And I find that's like the same with our emotions and our experiences. Like if we try and avoid the bad experiences or the hard experiences, then we don't really ever get to follow the dream of the good ones, or you know what I mean? Like you can't.
Yeah, life ebbs and flows, and I think a lot of people struggle with that a lot. I see it a lot every day. And I can share we all do that. I don't care if you're a
Yeah, of course.
billionaire, you're the poorest person in the world. I don't even care. We all do it. All of us do. There's no special mediation for that. Um, that process of process of rebirth that you brought up is really powerful because I personally I'm going through it right now, and it's a big one. I never saw myself where I'm at right now doing what I'm doing. I never saw that. But the thing is, when we do go through very big loss, and if we lose, I've talked to people across the world. I'll share. I've talked to people that have attempted suicide on their own life. They know somebody that committed suicide. They've lost somebody to gun violence. They've went through a nasty divorce. They've lost people the way I have. I've talked to this a myriad of people that have gone through those experiences that are very brutal, they're very rough, and they're devastating, like you said. And I've watched some of these people take that horrible, ugly experience of life and transform it into a rebirth of something bigger than they ever thought they would be. And these people have become authors, these people have become motivational speakers, coaches like myself. They've done some very beautiful work in this world because of that tragedy. And I think that's the cycle and purpose of why we have an ebb and flow of good and bad. It always elevates like this constant. And so there's times of life that we lose and it's devastating. It's sometimes life will take us to our knees and then some. And we'll say, why is this happening to me? I didn't deserve this. Like, what the hell is this? Other times of life, we say we're very grateful. We appreciate what's going on. We never even saw the good that was coming, same direction. So to really, I love what you've been saying today on this podcast about appreciating the cycle of death and rebirth and what the opportunities are in those moments to become better as ourselves in this present moment, and also who we're going to be.
Yeah, I've like, um part of the reason why I say things like this is after that Asia experience, I did attempt suicide, and I had a spiritual awakening after that. And I've lost so much through that. Even like for me, I kind of, like I say, have this ebbs and flows. Obviously I didn't die.
That's a good thing.
Still here. Well, like I say, we make assumptions it was a good thing and all that, but at the time, even that was quite devastating because I had decided I wanted to die. And I was like, right, I'm still here then. I've still got to deal with this horrible situation. But I had to grow. Like you say, I was reborn from that. I was a different person beyond that. And I used that energy, like, so I kind of use that in, I'll talk a little bit about this other part of my life. I used that spiritual awakening energy and completely changed my life. So I had a lot of healing to do. I had a lot of recovery to do. Ultimately, it's why I've ended up where I am, talking about the things that I do and creating the space that I've created. I love school. But between them, like I say, I spent a lot of time doing community gardens and things. And I put my heart and soul into that. And there was a period in my life a couple of years ago where one thing after another just was completely like wiped out. I had my nan died, my mum had a pretty serious stroke, was in intensive care for a long time, and then while all that was going on, the community garden that I just spent 7 years creating, they kicked us off and started tearing it apart. And basically, like, everything that I loved and cherished, and this is after after rebuilding my entire life, right? I've done everything, I'm doing everything right, going through a whole recovery process and everything, and it was all gone in the space of like a few months. So I just had like completely wiped out, and that was a lot to deal with. So I kind of had to go back and, like I say, it's hard sometimes when you come the other side to fully remember. Like, we never fully remember our pain and our struggle and our suffering. That was a really difficult time, and we had like a lot to go through to get back. I say we because my mum had to go, she had a lot of recovery to do, and I was helping care for her and that, but it took its toll on my health, and my health declined and everything like that. And I ended up really, really like having a dip, and when you think, like I say, why has this happened to me? Or why has this happened when I thought everything was going great, or I was doing everything right, all that. And really like slipped back into that like mindset. And it was only by tapping back into everything that I realized that I already knew that I've been able to then come back out of that again, like I say, use all that again to rebuild something even better. Like, what I'm trying to say again is we've no idea, right, what is going to happen in the future. We don't know, right? We don't know. And we can judge everything as good or bad if we want. And sometimes it really feels like, like I said, it's devastating. We lose things. It's really difficult and challenging. And I don't even take these particularly peaceful times for granted anymore, because I've realized even that, like when I went through that first spiritual awakening, and I was really like, I just thought everything would be like better, if that's the word. I don't know quite how to explain it. I guess I thought that the world owed us something because I had been through this difficult, horrible experience, and then it was just more happened, and it was getting harder and things like that. And what I actually ultimately realize now is that all we can do is deal with what we've got. But I find when we deal with it with honesty and like I say, with actually like processing what's happening, looking at it, directly at it, going through it. And I'm like big into like a bit, like say I'm curious, I'm a bit of a problem solver. I like to try and find my way through. So I'm always like looking to try and get out the other end. And that's how I found my health and well-being again. And I really do appreciate it. And I don't want to tip into it. But by going through that, now I've got so many like insights and skills and things. I can't ever imagine she says. Touch wood. Do you do that in America? I'm
Oh
not
yeah,
tempting you, Kate.
knock on wood. That's a good luck
Yeah.
thing.
Because I've been through that consciously and paid attention to it, I know how to deal with more of the difficult stuff, if that makes sense.
You know, what you're talking about is a lot of, you asked a question, you know, why does this happen to me? And I get that question a lot in my coaching and a lot on my podcast. And I keep telling people that happened for you. It didn't happen
Yeah.
to you. Your suicide attempt, that happened for you. That wasn't a bad thing. That was a good thing that happened because you took that experience and you did something with it. You chose to see a different path. And that's where I've listened to you on this podcast share this so much about your journey that you never stayed stuck. You never said, "Oh, this is just awful and I'm going to stay here." You always said like you're a problem solver, you're a fixer. You like to say there's always a solution, there's always a way out. There's always a way to find this. And so I love that you describe that to people today because in the depths of our loss, in the depths of our grief, in the depths of our pain, that's something I've heard from a lot of suicide stories. I've heard in the last 2 weeks, by the way, I've heard several of them. And the common theme from all these people that never took their life is they found another way. They did it on
Yeah.
purpose. They said, I've now been to the depths of where that took me. I know what that is. I don't need to go there anymore. I now know my purpose. I now know my direction. Marcus Aurelius, if I remember right, the Greek philosopher, he said one time, you have the power to end this journey at any point you want. And most people misunderstand this quote. Everybody thinks, oh, well, you can just like commit suicide and you can just end this any way you want. That's not really what he meant by that. What he meant is that this journey is going to be hard. It's going to be met with struggle. It's not going to be easy. And there's going to be a lot of effort required on your part to make this journey an experience. The fact that you can end it at any point is the easy way out. It really is. You can stop it at any time you want, but you will miss out on so much of your life and your purpose of why you're here and what you're doing if you choose that option. So there's always this ability to become better on this journey, to learn and to grow and evolve and change. And I think that part of that process is that death and rebirth cycle. And whether that's metaphorical or even physical at that point, like you said, it's a process of the planet and it's a process of our
Yeah.
journey as people.
If you watch like I said, I love nature. It's literally taught me everything that I consider valuable in my life. Like gardening and just connecting with nature, grounding and watching, observing. Like if you watch animals and things, right? Animals experience grief and loss. Like, animals are still sentient. They still like love the other animals that are in their pack or whatever it is, right? That they're the group that they're in, and they lose them and all that. And if you watch an animal, animals struggle, animals get organized and prepare, and they want comfort, and they're always trying to keep themselves safe. You know what I mean? Like these primal instincts that we all, as living beings, have. They're like so aware and in tune with that it's like, yes, animals can get traumatized or they can have really difficult situations and stuff, but you very rarely see an animal that'll just give up and stop. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like even
that's
like
true.
it can be really badly wounded, and so they might rest, but they'll still try and live. It's like a plant. Like you can like just watch a weed in your garden. Try and cut back a weed in your garden, right? That you don't want there. And just watch it come back again and again and again and again and again. And it's like that's what, like, I don't know, that's just how I feel like life is. That's like that thing in us that just wants to exist and like keep going. And actually, like it's even facing like your own suicide and stuff and facing your own death. Like when you do that, I think you're like I say, you're challenged with this primal thing, and you've got like an option. Because if somebody does choose in a way to attempt suicide or whatever, like I did, that was like a massive decision. You know what I mean? That was like a huge decision. And the fear that you have to overcome to even try and do that, like it's not like it's you know what I mean? It's not easy just to be like, right, I'm gonna give up in such a harsh sense, right? Is what I'm trying to say. And like I say, that it completely goes against our nature. Like I say, and like most animals and stuff, they just don't have that in them. They'll keep trying to live no matter what. They'll keep trying to like survive and go. And we have, I think, like I say, as much as I've observed, we're like the only kind of species that has that mind that will allow us to contradict that, right? And
Yeah,
it take like a lot of um power to choose to overpower that. But what I realized through that process of feeling at that attempt was I'd made one of the most difficult decisions of my life, right? Didn't go my way, but I completely overcame my fear. That's what happened in that situation. Like, so like I wasn't afraid of death anymore.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
Like a bit like animals that they're always trying to survive, right? And of course animals have fear and they try and avoid pain or they try and avoid death, but they don't fear pain and they don't fear death. Do you know what I mean? Like they don't live
yeah,
in that
it's
fear. They live for living. You know what I mean? They live to try and find food. They live to try and breed. They live to try and like keep their environment not like safe. You know what I mean? Like they want to be safe and
yeah.
comfortable, and they want to have like the abundance of more breeding and all that. Right? That's what animals want to do. They want all the nice stuff, but they're very aware of when something comes up to respond to it to stay alive. Whereas we, for some reason, have got this like thing about like say like fearing pain or fearing death or fearing struggle, loss, whatever it is, right? Once you deal with the fear, you just end up living for life again. Like so I think that's a bit like when you say like when you have a loss, like a huge loss like that, and you go through it and you're like, oh, like I survived, I've built skills, even I've become stronger. You don't fear the loss anymore. So then it gives you that fuel to then try new things and do new things because you know, like, oh well, if even if it doesn't go right, even if it doesn't go exactly how I imagine, or even if there's a hurdle, like you're gonna survive it. You're gonna be okay. Like it might be
Yeah, it's
hard, but you're still gonna get through it, and you're still gonna survive. And I just think the more that you can cultivate that and not be afraid of feeling of we have a big fear of fear, like say a big fear of pain. The more you have to like, the more that you're present with this sort of stuff,
yeah, you gotta,
less it holds back.
yeah, it's the thing that I'll share after I lost my son. I asked God a lot. I said, "You could have taken my life, and I would have wished you did, by the way. I wish you would have.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want an innocent child to lose its life. I just didn't. I said I would die for that child. I would. It's not even a question in my head still this day. But what I learned through that experience when I was in that place of pain, and I'm sharing that for purpose, that I found myself lose that fear. I've lost, and I'm not. I'll be honest with you, just because of where your story's taken us today, that I'm not scared to die anymore. I'm just not. I've accepted that that's my fate one day, whatever way it comes. I don't get to. I watched an episode of House a really long time ago. There was a doctor on one of the episodes, and he said, "There's two things in life we don't choose and have no control over, and that's when we're birthed into the world and when we die. We don't control those." And so he said, we spend so much of our life trying to control those things when we have no control over it. And so he said, where's the point in living if you're so fearful of that? Where's the point of living if you're so focused on preventing it? Something you can't control.
Yeah.
And I'll say the experiences I've gone through similar to what you experienced when you went through that suicide attempt is this, it's a rebirth. It's in you that you overcame this fear. You overcame this thing that was holding you back. That you may not have even fully understood in that moment, by the way, because hindsight's
Oh God, no,
2020.
no, no. That was like
Um,
years later when I
yeah,
realized.
so when you do get to that place though of conquering that fear, this whole new person comes up. It's like a flower coming through the dirt. It comes up, and the flower always just goes like this, and it's really a symbolic gesture of what rebirth is like. I went to the ocean a month ago, and there were these huge 15-foot swells breaking over the jetty, and I stood on the way on the side the waves were crashing. And I saw people looking at me like, "You're gonna get swept off the rocks. You're gonna get it," and I was going. I don't care. And I mean I probably looked like a crazy person and that's fine. But because of my life experiences I had, I said I want to be in that place where I might have that happen. I want to be in that place where that could happen. I pushed myself into that place of fear on purpose with intention. And what I found when I went and did that, and I stood there, probably 10, 15 waves went flying by me, not that far from where I was standing, probably 10 feet away. Um, I stood there in that moment and said, this could happen right now. This could all be a problem right now. And it never happened. And so I faced that fear and I conquered it and said, I'm not scared of that anymore. A lot of people are, but I'm not. And I said, but it takes facing that fear for you to actually realize where your full potential lies. Mark Manson wrote a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And he wrote this whole expose about all these people he dated across the world, all his travels and everything. And the end of the book, he literally jumps over a fence on the Cape of Good Hope, if I remember right. It's a 300-foot cliff all the way down, and it's a notorious spot that people commit suicide. And he jumped over the fence. He walked right over to the ledge and sat on the ledge. And he said the most powerful experience he had in that moment was realizing that he could take his own life. And he said, I didn't do it. I heard a lot of people did, but when I sat there, I realized how much power I had to make something of my life. I had so much power to use my experiences to help other people. And he said this was a part of my book and became one because I put myself right on the edge, right where it was life or death. And he said that's an experience that changed my life. And I just thought it was really powerful expose to hear you share your story about that, of that rebirth process and where that's led you today. I wanted to ask you too, as we're kind of getting wrapped up on things, tell me a little bit about that rebirth process. What were some breakthroughs that you had and some change of thoughts you had after going through that experience?
Oh God. Well, that was years ago. So much. I mean,
I know it's a loaded question. I just you sound like
yeah.
you sound like somebody that's done a lot of deep personal transformation and a lot of deep soul searching. And I see this beautiful person that's been through some really hard experiences of life, and for you to be on podcasts and sharing your story and just the beautiful person that you are, I just think you got something very, very big out of that experience.
Do you know what it is for me? It's hard for us to pinpoint key things. One, because that's not how my memory works. I just, and like I say, now I try to just stay present. So I kind of go through experiences and then they kind of leave us, and I've just grown and evolved over a process. I journal a lot and write it down. So sometimes if something significant happens, I write it down. And over the years, there's been like loads of things that have all built up that's kind of changed how I think, how I feel. But everything I've done has been like I've diving into the deeper understanding of what things mean and being present with them and why things matter and stuff. So I kind of call that like shadow work, like looking at all the stuff, looking directly at everything we're trying to avoid, right? And and then that process, like uh, which I refer to as life design, and then using that as fuel to make a change, to like either see something differently or something. So it's quite hard for us to pinpoint because actually, for me, all of my recovery and everything has been through a process. Like it's all happened like quite naturally. And yes, I've had like these really significant events and things that have happened, and they've forced us to like look at something or try and analyze it or something again. But like it's just building and cultivating that whole energetically, I guess you call it, like is fearlessness, I guess. I don't know. It's quite a hard question for us to answer. Sometimes
Yeah.
on another day, at another time, it might like come like that. But like everything I
Well,
tend to share about now is that we like consciously create our experience, right? So if we go right back to the beginning of what we said, we can either brush things on the carpet, pretend they didn't happen, not look at them, avoid them, right? And then we'll not learn anything and we'll not grow. And actually, what might happen is that'll consume us. That'll keep us in fear. It'll keep us afraid. It'll build up to a point where we realize we might as well be dead because we're not living anymore. Do you know what I mean? We haven't got anything in our life anymore that we're actually afraid of losing because we don't really know how to love. Because grief for me, especially, or trauma, the root of all that is like, where is the love? It's like it comes back love. So if you can then look at something, if you can look at it, and we're all capable of it, right? Whatever reason, we're like taught, like I say, not to look at these things, especially the shitty things. We're taught not to look at it. But actually, we're also taught often not even to look at the really good stuff. Like, well, people will actively avoid looking at like I say, trying to have good things, have beautiful things, feel joy, even all that sort of thing, in case we lose it, in case it goes. You know what I mean? Like there's almost that thing there. So the more that we can just literally be present, look at things, and then use that as like the next step, I guess. You know what I mean? Like what's that gonna mean in your life? What's that gonna fuel in your life? Where's that? What direction is that gonna head you in? And like I said, for me, it's been years of like constantly redirecting my life into this present space, like just accepting what is, accepting the ebbs and flows. Anytime, anytime I feel doubtful or stuck or anything, I just always go back and look at nature. I
I
feel
share
like
that
saying the
with
same
you.
things again and again.
I think you said
Or
it
I
really
create
well.
something because I'm a creative person. I create something. If you're feeling really stuck, like create, just
Yeah,
create something.
you said it really well. Grief and trauma. I read this quote this week. It's the first time I've heard it, but it's love with nowhere to go,
Yeah,
and I thought that was really powerful. Whoever wrote that, because that really is what happens to us when we go through grief and loss and trauma. Even in situations of suicide, our love is looking for somewhere to go, and sometimes we don't know where to see that or where to find it. We don't know where to look for it.
but that's the
It's the same.
adventure. So there you go. That's maybe the insight, right? So grief, trauma, it's all based on love, right? Oh my God, what am I going to do with? There's nowhere for it to go. It's like the pain of the loss, whatever it is, right? At the core of that is always wanting that rebirth, right? It's wanting love. So what are we going to do with it? That's where I create. That's where I create. What am I going to do? So this is how you've ended up doing your podcast or whatever. You take all that and you're like, well, I want to share it with people. I want to share this story. I want to support somebody else. You might want to make some art. That's why I started the community garden project and stuff like that. You know what I mean? I want to create. What is this telling me about my past, about my experiences? What does it mean? All of this pain, or all of this heartache, whatever, what does this make me understand about life? Probably that it matters, that people matter, that experiences matter, that connection matters. You know what I mean? Like that the love is what's most important. So right now, what do I choose to do with it? Because most of the time, you can find that will give you a rebirth outlet. It might be creating some sort of event or ritual to honor a loved one, whether that's private or public or whatever. Like I say, it might be creating some art, it might be starting a project, some people start businesses, they might build something. But that is, I think, how the majority of significant things that humans create come from.
I think creation is a big part of that healing process. And I share that with a lot of people. I always say find some kind of outlet for that. For me lately, it's been doing podcasts with people across the world. And I'll share. I talk to people about topics I've never experienced in my life. I've never had that wavelength come across my world before. But I enjoy hearing all these grief stories and healing journeys from different people across different cultures, different continents, different backgrounds, different experiences. Because grief is not linear, it's not a one-way thing. And I always try to tell people there is no guidebook for it. It's like having a kid. Nobody says, here's the exact playbook of when you have a child, if they're screaming and kicking, do this. If they're this, do that. There is no playbook for that. There is no guideline for that. And so it's through these experiences of sharing grief, loss, and trauma that we can listen to other people's stories, experiences, and say, okay, I got one or two things away from that really resonate with me. I can go create my own healing journey in my way that I need it for me. Some people paint, some people draw, some people work in community gardens, some people donate time to community centers or they volunteer. Some people read, some people journal. There's not really one said modality that works for everyone. And I think that's the beauty part of grief is that it's an individual journey and we all get individual outcomes of it, but it's what we can make with it that is so powerful.
And there's no like, it's so freeing because there's no rules, right? You can do all of them if you want, right? You can do all of them, you can do any of them in any way you want. Like it's our way is fine. Our way
Exactly.
is fine. Whatever we
Uh,
want to do with all that experience is that's exactly what life wants. We have
and
this
that,
experience, right? It turns to shit. It turns to
yep.
compost, right? It turns to compost, and then we get to choose how we grow out of it.
Yeah,
And what
I love that abbreviation of compost because everything grows from the ground. Everything does. All of our food
everything
we
does.
eat, everything comes out of it.
Everything.
So it's
We wouldn't be alive if like millions, if not billions of other things had to die beforehand. Probably trillions of things, just so you and I are here having this conversation right now.
exactly. Terry, I just want to say thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast today. This has
Thank you
been
for
an
having us.
awesome session. Um, before I sign off today, I wanted to ask you if people want to connect with you online, where can we find you?
Yes, that would be brilliant. Check out Love School, loveschool.uk. I share, there's lots, you can connect with me in all different ways on there. Love School's also got a YouTube channel if you want to watch videos and stuff, but you can actually like link with me at loveschool.uk. And I share courses and things and one-to-one support there for all different things, but mainly it's around shadow work and life design and that I've talked about and how we can like literally reconnect with nature, reconnect with them cycles, understand how we can create the compost, if you like, use stuff to grow and heal, recover. And it's not even all about all of the nice stuff. Like I say, it's like literally facing where we are, who we are, how we are, and moving through this process for whatever that might be. Generally, I support people through because I have history with like abuse or trauma, that sort of thing. People who are struggling with that, if they feel really stuck in that energy, that's what a lot of people come to Love School for. But anyway, we're all connected. Like I say, we all have these different experiences, whether it be grief or loss, and in many different ways. So I'm very happy to connect with people over at Love School or on YouTube or on my Facebook. It's all on the socials. I've
Well,
got no, I'm like the worst at like this, the promotion where you're like, but go to Love School. All the links are on Love School.
I love that for you. And I've been following you since we met and I love your content. I follow you every day on Facebook.
Thank
And
you.
I,
Yes, I've seen the love
but
there. Thanks.
well, I just want to thank all of you guys today listening to this podcast. Thank you for joining Terry and I on another episode of the Empower Grief Journey. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody that you know who could benefit from it. The Empower Grief Journey is an honoring journey about embracing your emotions and finding your strength in your own time. I want to invite you guys to follow this podcast on Facebook and YouTube at empowergriefjourney.com. If you're never alone on this journey, and I want you guys to know that, you never are. This is not a journey that you have to do by yourself. We can always do this together. We can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.